The Ferdinand was a heavy armored vehicle from World War II, with technical features that played a significant role in its operational history. In combat, its frontal armor could withstand numerous hits from enemy anti-tank shells, allowing the machine to keep moving under fire. Its 88mm cannon methodically took out armored targets at distances of roughly 1 mile, while opposing crews often could not break through its defenses. However, later on these very machines often broke down or were destroyed by infantry weapons, mines and grenades. That turned out to be the story of one of the German military industry's famous developments, the Ferdinand self-propelled gun. The conditions for its creation arose in the spring of 1941 when the Wehrmacht command assessed the situation on the Eastern Front. Soviet heavy KV-1 and medium T-34 tanks were showing high resistance to the standard anti-tank weaponry of the time. The military needed new heavy hardware capable of shifting the balance of power. The Porsche and Henschel design bureaus received orders to start work on a heavy tank project that would later become known as the Tiger. Ferdinand Porsche proposed an unconventional engineering solution. His prototype, the VK4501P, featured an electromechanical transmission. 2 gasoline Maybach engines powered generators that fed electric motors on each track. The operating principle was similar to the systems found in modern hybrid cars. This approach simplified steering and allowed the driver to regulate the speed of each track separately, ensuring high maneuverability for a vehicle of such size. Confident of victory, the Porsche Design Bureau began producing chassis before the official results of the competition were even announced. Factories were already assembling hulls, installing engines and transmissions, as the developers wanted to save time and start mass production as soon as possible. But in June 1942, the military commission chose the Henschel project instead. The decision came down to technical factors. The Porsche prototype was complex and required highly skilled maintenance, while the electromechanical transmission raised doubts about reliability in the field. Henschel, on the other hand, offered a more traditional and proven option. As a result, about 90 finished chassis were left sitting in warehouses. Their future was uncertain, which meant a significant waste of resources. The situation changed with the personal intervention of Adolf Hitler, who ordered that a use be found for the manufactured machines. Specialists quickly devised a plan to convert the chassis into heavy self-propelled anti-tank guns. Engineers removed the turret, replacing it with a fixed superstructure housing a powerful cannon, and significantly beefed up the armor. Development was entrusted to the Alket firm, which specialized in self-propelled artillery, while assembly was set up at the Nibelungenwerke plant. Work began in January 1943, with engineers working at a feverish pace. By April or May of that year, the manufacturer had completed all 91 vehicles. The resulting machines boasted impressive protective characteristics. The hull's frontal armor reached nearly 8 inches, exceeding other tanks of the period, while the side and rear protection stood at over 3 inches. The front of the casemate also packed 8 inches of steel. For the main armament, the designers chose the 88mm PaK 43-2 gun with a 71 caliber barrel. This weapon could engage Soviet tanks at ranges of over 1 mile, and a supply of 55 rounds gave the vehicle immense firepower. However, the project had a significant flaw. The developers did not install a single machine gun. This made the heavy, 72-ton machine vulnerable to infantry in close combat. The electromechanical transmission, borrowed from the Porsche prototype, had its advantages and disadvantages. The system ensured smooth handling, but often overheated during operation. Top speed was 22 miles per hour on the highway and 6 to 9 miles per hour on rough terrain. Its range was limited to 90 miles on roads and 55 miles off-road. High ground pressure created a risk of the vehicle getting stuck on soft surfaces. By July 1943, 89 Ferdinands had joined 2 newly formed units. the 653rd and 654th Heavy Anti-Tank Battalions. The crews underwent intensive training and studied the specifics of the new equipment. Drivers learned to maintain the complex transmission, while gunners practiced firing. The Wehrmacht command was preparing these battalions for Operation Citadel during the offensive at the Kursk salient. The plan was ambitious. Heavy self-propelled guns were assigned the role of an armored battering ram meant to punch through the deep defenses on the northern face of the Kursk salient. These machines were considered almost invulnerable to standard Red Army anti-tank weapons. Engineers had calculated that standard 45 and 76 mm guns would not penetrate the 8-inch armor even at point-blank range. The Ferdinands were supposed to move in the vanguard, destroy firing positions, and clear the way for tanks and infantry. On July 8, 1943, the first reports came in about these new self-propelled guns in combat. Artillery crews found that their shells were doing no damage to the machines. But the real massive deployment began on July 9th near Ponyri Station. Wehrmacht command formed a powerful strike group. The 654th Ferdinand Battalion, the 505th Tiger Battalion, the 216th Sturmpanzer Brummbär Battalion, and several units of regular tanks. A concentration of heavy armor like this on a single sector of the front had never been seen before. On the morning of July 9th, the strike group moved out. The Ferdinands led the way. Their 88 mm guns methodically destroyed fortifications. The breakthrough at the 1st of May State Farm was successful, but the cost was high. The defending command had mined every approach to their lines. Despite their power, the heavy machines began detonating mines and anti-tank charges. Tracks snapped and road wheels were blown to pieces. Anti-tank artillery laid down heavy fire, aiming for the running gear, the only vulnerable spot on these machines. July 10th saw the fiercest attacks near Ponyri. The self-propelled guns broke through to the very outskirts of the station. The defenders threw every available resource into the fight. Artillery of all calibers, including the heavy 8-inch B4 howitzers, fired high-explosive shells of massive power. A direct hit from such a shell didn't punch through the Ferdinand's armor, but it shifted the front plates, jammed the gun, and left the crew concussed. Drivers tried to dodge the heavy shelling, veering out of the cleared lanes only to hit fresh mines. Smoke, explosions, and burning vehicles filled the battlefield. One after another, the self-propelled guns were immobilized. Because they lacked machine guns, they were vulnerable to assault groups. Infantry with grenades and Molotov cocktails crept up to the disabled vehicles, attacking through open hatches and air intakes. The crews fired back with their personal weapons, but it did little to stop the organized infantry attacks. On July 11th, the situation changed. Command redeployed the 505th Tiger Battalion and other units to different sectors of the front. The strike group was significantly weakened. The Ferdinands were left with almost no support, and the intensity of the attacks faded. On July 12th and 13th, the Wehrmacht stopped trying to break through the defenses. Instead, evacuation of the damaged equipment began. However, dragging out the 72-ton machines proved difficult, as the recovery vehicles couldn't handle the weight. On July 14th, Soviet troops launched a counteroffensive. The Wehrmacht positions could not withstand the pressure. During the retreat, German units left behind 21 Ferdinands. Crews blew up some of the vehicles themselves to prevent capture, while others got stuck and were abandoned on the battlefield. Soviet soldiers inspected the abandoned equipment, recording the thickness of the armor and the size of the guns. The 653rd Battalion was operating in a different sector. In the area around the village of Toploy, combat operations lasted from July 9th through the 12th and were less intense than the events near Ponyri. The open terrain allowed the Ferdinands to effectively use their main advantage, their long-range guns. The self-propelled guns took up positions on the high ground and hit Soviet tanks before they could even return fire. However, minefields also played a role in the situation. By the end of the fighting, the battalion had lost 8 vehicles. After the failure of Operation Citadel, Wehrmacht forces began a general retreat. July and August of 1943 were marked by a series of rearguard actions. Small groups of Ferdinands held back the Red Army advance, though their numbers dwindled day by day. The final clashes took place on the approaches to Orel. Soviet units captured several damaged guns that German crews had been preparing to evacuate, but failed to move in time. In mid-August, command transferred the combat-ready vehicles to the Zhytomyr and Dnipropetrovsk areas for routine repairs. Mechanics replaced damaged guns, installed new sights, and welded up holes in the armor. As of September 1, 1943, 50 units remained in service. Permanent losses totaled 39 vehicles, a significant number for equipment that had a reputation for being so well protected. Soviet specialists conducted a detailed study of 4 machines captured near the village of Teploy and obtained vital technical data. An inspection of 2 of the guns revealed damage to the running gear, torn tracks, and broken road wheels and torsion bars. A third vehicle had sustained serious damage from 122 mm fire. A high explosive shell had shifted the front hull plate, yet failed to penetrate the armor. The 4th self-propelled gun had bogged down in sandy soil, and its crew was taken prisoner. Interrogation records showed that morale among German tank crews was dropping, and their equipment often failed them right when they needed it most. At the same time, Ferdinand crews claimed to have destroyed 502 pieces of Soviet armor. That number seems inflated, since in the heat of battle, gunners often claim kills on the same targets. Still, even allowing for errors, the 88 mm guns proved highly effective. The main issue was not firepower. It was the tank destroyer's survivability on the battlefield. The results of the fighting at Kursk forced the Wehrmacht command to rethink how they used these machines. They recognized the lack of a machine gun as a serious design flaw. In the fall of 1943, they began upgrading the surviving vehicles. Engineers cut a port in the front hull for an MG-34 machine gun and installed a commander's cupola with better optics on the cabin roof. The upgraded tank destroyers were given a new official name, Elephant, which translates to elephant. In January 1944, the first company of the 653rd Battalion, consisting of 11 elephants, a recovery vehicle based on the Tiger P, and 2 armored ammo carriers, was deployed to Italy. Allied troops had landed at Anzio and were threatening Rome, so the heavy tank destroyers were tasked with halting their advance. Despite Allied air superiority and the difficult mountain terrain, the unit operated effectively. On March 30th and 31st, a massive battle took place in the suburbs of Rome. 2 of the tank destroyers held off an advance of 50 American Sherman tanks for 10 hours. The elephants took up positions on high ground, allowing their guns to methodically pick off the approaching enemy vehicles. American forces lost over 30 tanks without managing to dislodge the tank destroyers, while the German crews emerged from the battle with no losses. As of June 26, 1944, the company had only 2 combat-ready elephants at its disposal, with 1 more machine under repair. The remnants of the unit continued fighting near San Casciano and Florence throughout July. It wasn't until August 8th that the 3 surviving self-propelled guns and 1 recovery tank were loaded onto railcars and shipped through Vienna to Poland to link up with the main force of the 653rd Battalion. The other 2 companies had been transferred by command to the Eastern Front, near Ternopil, back in April 1944. In addition to 31 elephants, these companies included 2 recovery vehicles on the Porsche Tiger chassis, 1 based on the Panther tank, and 3 ammunition carriers. The fighting in late April near Ternopil was extremely intense. Soviet forces launched a massive offensive, utilizing their numerical superiority in tanks and artillery. The elephants fought while surrounded, covering the retreat of the main forces. Over several days of continuous clashes, 14 vehicles were disabled. the losses appeared significant, but thanks to the specialized equipment, the personnel managed to quickly restore 11 of the self-propelled guns. Mechanics worked around the clock, often under enemy fire, replacing tracks, fixing transmissions, and repairing hull damage. October 1944 brought changes for the 653rd Battalion. The unit began receiving new Jagdtiger heavy tank destroyers, even more powerful machines armed with long-barreled 128mm guns. The Elephants were gradually phased out of the battalion. The second company, which kept operating these self-propelled guns, was officially renamed the separate 614th Heavy Self-Propelled Anti-Tank Company on December 15. By late December, the unit was transferred to the 4th Panzer Army. Their mission was to bolster anti-tank defenses along critical sectors of the front. On January 12, 1945, the company went into battle near the Polish city of Kielce against the 1st Ukrainian Front. It was here that they faced a direct confrontation, the exact scenario the German crews considered most dangerous. The IS-2 heavy tanks posed a serious challenge to the self-propelled guns. These machines were equipped with a 122mm cannon capable of penetrating the Elephant's 8-inch armor at medium range. For the first time, the crews faced vehicles that were a real threat in a direct firefight. The clash was incredibly intense. The Elephant gunners tried to engage from maximum range, while the tank crews pushed to close the distance for a guaranteed kill. On February 25, 1945, the unit was redeployed to Wunsdorf to shore up defenses. With the advance on Berlin underway, every single piece of armor mattered. The Elephants took up positions on the approaches to the city, preparing for the defense. The final battles involving these self-propelled guns unfolded around Wunsdorf and Zossen. During the clashes, the unit lost 2 vehicles. Artillery and aircraft methodically destroyed the fortifications. The surviving Elephants retreated to Berlin, where they joined the city's defense. 2 more self-propelled guns were destroyed during the street fighting. As of March 31, 1945, 1 vehicle was listed with the Kummersdorf Company, though its further fate remains unknown. Eventually, the Soviet Union ended up with at least 8 captured intact Ferdinands. These specimens sparked significant interest among military engineers. Experts carefully studied the design, dismantled the mechanisms, and conducted experimental shelling to determine the most effective ways to counter this equipment. Specialists fired on one of the vehicles near Poniri in July and August of 1943 to test the durability of the armor. Gunners fired weapons of various calibers, ranging from 45mm anti-tank guns to heavy 122mm howitzers. Engineers measured the penetration depth, analyzed the nature of the damage, and drew conclusions regarding optimal firing angles. In the fall of 1944, testers used another self-propelled gun as a target to evaluate new weaponry, specifically experimental subcaliber and shape-charged shells. By the end of 1945, research institutes and proving grounds had 6 of these units at their disposal. Researchers used them for a variety of tests, from checking ammunition to studying the specifics of the electromechanical transmission. Later, designers dismantled some of the vehicles for a detailed analysis of their construction. Engineers were especially interested in the electric drive system, which was a groundbreaking solution in tank design back then. In the end, officials sent all the captured self-propelled guns to be melted down, except for 1. The rest of the vehicles had taken so much damage in combat that restoring them was pointless. The only surviving example later became a museum piece. The history of these machines is full of myths that are still common today. One of the most widespread ones is about the vehicle's name. In Western sources, it is mostly known as the Elephant, which led to the mistaken belief that this is the only correct name. In reality, both names are official. It is correct to call them Ferdinands before the upgrades in late 1943 and early 1944, and Elephants after that. The modernized version features a hull machine gun, a commander's cupola, and improved vision devices. There is a common claim that the biggest threat to this self-propelled gun came from heavy artillery like the A-19, ML-20, and Su-152, as well as aircraft. That idea was largely shaped by Soviet sources trying to highlight the effectiveness of their own weaponry. But the actual events at the Kursk salient tell a different story. The primary countermeasures against the Ferdinands were actually anti-tank and anti-personnel mines, hand grenades, and field artillery crews targeting the suspension. Those were the things that did the most damage. You also hear the version that on the Eastern Front, these machines were only used during the Battle of Kursk and were then transferred entirely to Italy. That is simply not true, since only one company with 11 vehicles operated on the Italian front. The remaining vehicles saw combat throughout 1943 and 1944 in Ukraine, near Ternopil, in Poland, and right in Berlin itself. However, the Battle of Kursk remains the only instance where Ferdinands were deployed in mass numbers. It was the only time all battalions operated simultaneously on a single sector of the front. Wartime documents and memoirs created false impressions about the actual number of these self-propelled guns. According to modern historians, veteran accounts mention over 800 Ferdinands supposedly fighting on various fronts from Leningrad to the Caucasus. This widespread belief stemmed from the vehicle's notoriety within the Red Army. After the Battle of Kursk, a special guide on how to combat this machine was published in large numbers. However, due to a lack of familiarity with other German armor, ordinary soldiers applied the name Ferdinand to almost any large gun with a rear fighting compartment, including the Nashorn, Hummel, Marder II, and Vespa. The crews fought on until the final days of the war, continuing to carry out their missions. Yet the machinery failed the soldiers far too often. The electro-mechanical transmission, intended by designers as an innovative solution, turned out to be a source of constant breakdowns in practice. Overheating, generator breakdowns, and electric motor failures occurred at the most critical moments of combat. The lack of a machine gun on early versions left the vehicles defenseless against infantry, while their massive weight limited mobility, often causing them to bog down on soft ground. Despite this, the Ferdinand's firepower remained formidable. The 88mm PaK-43 gun destroyed enemy tanks at ranges immune to return fire, and the 8-inch frontal armor withstood hits from most anti-tank shells. However, fatal design flaws and operational complexity negated every advantage. Of the 91 units built, only a few survived the conflict. The enemy destroyed or captured most of them, while a significant number were simply abandoned by their crews. The last of these self-propelled guns met their end on the streets of Berlin in the spring of 1945. Never having altered the course of the war, this model became a prime example of how engineering achievements and advanced technology lose their effectiveness due to design errors and flawed tactical application.